to another episode of Sustainability Unveiled. As always, my name is Jessica Hunt, and I am the host of this podcast. And I'm so thrilled to have our guest on with us today. Dan Diehl, CEO and President of Air Acuity, is here. And I'm going to give Dan the floor first, just to let us know a little bit about his background. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. My background, I guess, is really my whole career has been spent in the built environment, so large commercial buildings, and it's been a mix of new construction, energy efficiency, sustainability, and in a couple different areas, but primarily HVAC, building controls, and lighting, energy efficiency over my career.
Wonderful. And as a fellow Terp fan and graduate of the University of Maryland, what kind of led you on this path to where you are today?
Yeah, I graduated as a mechanical engineer from the University of Maryland. Definitely proud of it. Very fond of it. Started my career actually at Johnson Controls, out of college. And so that kind of introduced me into this space and kind of what led me down this path. And that was, I guess, the simple start of it. But, as I mentioned, during that career, had a pretty long tenure there for 11 years, but left to do something entrepreneurial after getting a graduate degree in business. And then so I had my own, I was partnered with somebody in another business doing energy efficient lighting, and then kind of had a stint with Lutron. And for the last, it's now like 16 years, been with Air Acuity, kind of joined it at the very early days of kind of launching kind of Air Acuity as a technology and a platform for the built environment. So most of all of my career has been in either one of those two fields and working in commercial buildings.
And before we get into some more conversation about Air Acuity and Thrive buildings, which we haven't talked about yet, I would really, like to know your opinion and your experience in terms of how the industry that you are in has really changed and evolved since you began your career.
That's a really good question, and I don't know if I would be completely unique in this response. I think it has, to a large degree, changed and evolved, but not nearly as fast as many other industries. And I think there's some interesting kind of reasons why buildings tend to be much longer life, less turnover. So, the life of a building could be 50, 70. Obviously we even see buildings that have been around a lot longer than that. And it tends to be a more conservative group with engineers, architects, and building owners and operators that, kind of have ways of doing things and maybe systems set up in place that work for them. And so change, I think in our space tends to happen a little bit slower than, say, like software or some other industries, which have a much quicker turn. I think even automotive is like a 7 to 10 year kind of life cycle turnover. So when I think about our industry, I think, wow, a lot has changed and technology has been, I actually got in, really dating myself, I've got introduced into the market when pneumatic controls were a thing, and, was there for the launch of direct digital controls for building automation systems. So I've seen some of that change. I saw all and explore LED technology coming through in lighting, and now you see the advance of analytics and a lot of people talking about AI for the built environment and fault detection diagnostic systems and independent data layer systems. So there has been a lot of change, but that's over a 30-plus career that's all happened. So I do think it changes the speed of adoption. It tends to be slower than.
I can definitely see that, especially with working with the different clients. What are some of the biggest goals that you have as the president and CEO of Air Acuity and Thrive Buildings? What do you want to see come down the pipeline with your companies in terms of, hitting those
customers? And I would really start by saying, I think the thing we're most proud of is we work with, customers that almost every single person that would listen to this podcast or have heard of and know of. So it's large, over 350 or so large institutional, on and on and on. And then you would have large life science firms and large healthcare, regional healthcare providers, research institutions. We'd even do large commercial office and places like Apple and Google. So the names we work with are really, we're obviously really proud of that. Following that, I would then say that our job is to assist them with their sustainability goals. And I think that goes back to a story of just, kind of if you look at my personal evolution in the built environment, it really stems from the fact that, kind of started with getting buildings have better control systems so that they could operate more efficiently. And that, it kind of started me down that path, and lighting was the same activity set of basically getting equipment and operations and maintenance to be more efficient, to help customer facilities with lower cost and more in a more sustainable manner. And what really kind of introduced me to Air Acuity was having seen those two kind of technologies come into the market and get adopted and make a big difference. At the time I was leaving lighting, it was really just looking at, okay, what's going to be the next thing that really needs to evolve and improve in the built environment. And that I really looked at that as air side energy efficiency, meaning like the amount of ventilation and the amount of heating, cooling, and ventilation that happens in buildings really could be optimized pretty significantly. And specifically we do a lot of larger, more complex type buildings, clean rooms, and healthcare, facilities. So when you look at those types of facilities, they use and utilize a lot more energy than like a normal commercial office building would. So I think the two things that really drove me and attracted me to Air Acuity was, okay, how do we tackle those more complex buildings? Number one, because there's a much bigger impact. And then also, how do we just, in general, improve this area of efficiency and sustainability built environment, going forward. So it was exciting. It was newer, and I saw it as being a really big opportunity. So that's really what attracted me. And then in the end of the day, the reason why we are able to work with those really good customers and do a lot of repeat business and more projects with them. Typically we work with clients over their portfolio. We're not really just doing a project, is because, we can really demonstrate the impact we have. From a little bit about that later. But we do really make a really big impact, a significant impact that has really attractive return on investment. So it just makes a lot of business sense for our customers to do that. And then having the co-benefits of sustainability and helping our customers in the pursuit of net zero and helping them achieve their sustainability goals is very honestly, it's very rewarding, and it's a lot of fun. So I get to work with really smart people and really on really fun projects, whether they be brand new buildings coming out of the ground and achieving net zero, or helping customers reduce the energy and the carbon goals that they have in their existing portfolio. It's a lot of fun and very rewarding.
Rewarding and fun. I mean, that's what you want when you go to work, right? You don't want to just go to work and do a job. You want to be able to come and really see that you are making a difference, which sounds like that you are doing with your clients. Now, sticking on the topic or air quality, and companies really, and your clients, as you said, really coming to realize that this is the next step in the built environment to help improve energy efficiency. So is this benefit, has it driven people, you think, to choose this energy savings measure more often since the COVID-19 pandemic, when obviously air quality was such a huge part of the discussion, as well as the number of wildfires that have increased, especially in the United States and in North America?
Yeah, I think those are absolutely drivers. The awareness of indoor air quality is way more known and important as a health, wellness, productivity. And you now are kind of really seeing that kind of more full-on impetus to get people back into the office and work environments in general. Across all those, if you look at it, it's better research spaces or better outcomes for an operating room, or more productivity and health and wellness for an office worker. I mean, all of those have really large benefits that go well beyond just energy savings and sustainability. I would say unfortunately, but I do think that many times they're overlooked when it comes to like procurement, and a lot of times we are doing, and we are in the business of dealing with facilities, and they look at things very much tend to look at things from like a hard ROI. How much energy am I saving? How much is this particular project costing? But when you look at all those co-benefits, and when you look at and you really think about them, we have one customer that talks about their insurance being the best in the whole entire UC system, and how much money they're able to save through better environmental health and safety programs and the way they operate their research facilities. There are a lot of co-benefits, and when you look at all of those, together, it has driven more people to kind of understand that this is a really big and important area, and it touches a lot of different constituents. It's not just a facilities quote unquote issue, but it's really it's a C-suite issue. When we work with our customers, many times we might have 4 or 5 different constituent groups at the table talking about our projects. They might be animal research professionals, they might be environmental health and safety, they might be infection control, they might be quality and compliance, alongside with facilities, alongside with sustainability, alongside with the C-suite. So a lot of times it takes it's a very when you talk about airflow buildings, it's really important, and it impacts everybody. All those things it impacts. And so what we always talk about is really optimizing airflow and the systems. You're trying to not reduce it. You're trying to provide the right amount where and when you need it. And in general, that saves a significant amount of energy, creates really meaningful economic impact. But then it also actually enhances the performance on all those fronts, because many times you actually are providing a lot more air where and when you need it. And you also now are measuring outcomes. We always talk about you can't really improve and or understand what's happening in your buildings until you measure it effectively over time. So it's really important that, as anything else, whether it's KPIs in business or whether it's, you're tracking your fitness on your Apple Watch or whatever it may be, you really do need to measure things and to understand what's actually happening to be able to make and improve intelligent business decisions from there. So it's a big part of what we do. We try to do that accurately for the life of a building, measure the key indoor air quality parameters, and really feed that into an automated response system, and then also allow the different constituents to see that data and take action on that data, use it for compliance, use it for health and safety, reporting, and better addressing of where there are problems in a specific building and where they may be able to be more proactive than reactive. So that again has been a huge, really exciting, I think, improvement in the built environment, is being able to measure the different indoor air quality parameters and being able to take action with them. And that is definitely something that's been newer over the last really decade in our space.
I can definitely see that. And while I was listening to you speak, one thing that just kept popping back into my head was school buildings. Having kids that are in the school system, and the air quality or lack thereof, depending on the time of year or the building, there really doesn't seem to be any consistency within specific school buildings, for example. But in terms of the built environment in general, is that something that you find clients are having to deal with, or owners of specific buildings, is quality?
Yes, yeah, 100%. And in schools is a really good example. And that, when I think about schools, I think all the way from higher ed, so a large teaching building at a university or a student library, all the way down to K through 12. And I know them all fairly well from kind of like a perspective and an HVAC design perspective. And we and others in the industry see all sides of indoor air quality when it comes to those buildings and how they operate. And just as you can go to the simplest example, just a K through 12 classroom building that doesn't have, operable windows for whatever reason, and they have not a lot of fresh air coming in. and you could have that class packed and CO2 levels going up well over 2,000 parts per million, which, not to go down a rabbit hole in terms of what that means, but it's really bad in terms of how well your body and brain are going to be able to function in that classroom. So we, having control systems and having air quality measurement and control that actually works to make sure that those buildings are ventilated appropriately for the task at hand, and is a really important. It's a really important aspect of, and it also relates then to how often kids will get sick, how much will, infectious, airborne particles spread into school, and, how well the filtering of the air. There's a lot of different sides to that. So it's a certainly deeper conversation, but to your point, it's a very important one. And, certainly our job and what we try to work on every day in the various building types that we work in is how to make sure that that's improved to the degree that they do that. What kind of control systems do they need? Their filtration, are they measuring it? Do they know what's happening in their buildings first and foremost? And so there's a lot of different tentacles to that. But yeah, it's a really important aspect, and everybody's a lot more aware of it after the pandemic, seeing how we all learned that that particular pandemic was spread with airborne, kinds of respiratory grade particles, and certainly in improperly ventilated spaces, you are going to be much more susceptible to getting COVID than you would be in a outdoor air environment where you've got
it's always my favorite when one of my kids comes home and lets me know that there are kids absent in their class because they're sick, because I just inevitably know that in the next week or so, it's going to hit our house too, especially because where we live, you open the windows because of everything that's going on in the United States in education today. So that's a whole nother aspect of something that, our sustainability and our facilities here and to tackle and work around.
Yeah. We have a lot of K-12 clients in Maryland, actually. So there's been some really good school designs that have been brought to market. And again, it's, there's different views and different philosophies, but there are some really, or I would say more modern, I guess, or more current AC designs where they have higher filtration, higher air change rates, air quality measurement systems in the schools. They are there, and I think it's also a really important just message for generally for people that would listen to this podcast, or just in general, there's tends to be a lack of awareness that sustainable designs tend to be as cost effective. Sometimes they cost a little bit more first cost, but from a life cycle cost perspective, they're usually generally much better. They're more energy efficient. The systems that they're utilizing are used less, so the O&M cost of those systems tends to be less. So I think the biggest message always is to get out there is you're looking at things from purely a first cost basis tends to be one of the bigger problems in the industry, and that happens a lot in K through 12. I think just from my experience that people can tend to be short-sighted, and first cost is certainly important. Don't get me wrong, I understand it 100%. But you really, when the school, you're building that for, again, 30 plus 50 years. So you really want to be looking at the life cycle cost when you're designing those.
Definitely. And as you mentioned earlier too, and it's kind of like a domino effect where if the right systems are not in place, it can affect, as you said, healthcare within in different buildings. Specifically, if we're talking about a K through 12 school, obviously the teachers and the students that are in the school, and that can have repercussions that are just longstanding and continue down the road. So you do have to put that into your cost benefit analysis when it comes to retrofitting a school or new sustainable designs that are coming out. So sticking on this topic a little bit more when it comes to issues that building owners might deal with, based on your experience over the past 30 years, and even I would say more in the past 10, what have you seen as the top 2 or 3 biggest issues that really can get in the way of the decarbonization program?
Number one always is it really starts with leadership. And the reason is actually a pretty simple one to explain. It is because there's a lot of different constituents that are involved. It takes getting all those various parties at the table and really having the a collaborative dialogue and an understanding of what we're trying to. You just talk. What's the mission here? Is it education? Is it really lower infection rates in the operating room? Is it education, higher education? Is it research? Is it compliance for a clean room? These all these different facilities are mission critical. They're there to support the mission, and they're there to deliver an outcome that doesn't negatively impact it. So what ends up happening is many times I think in general the built environment again gets relegated to a facilities only conversation. And where we see success, and it is the 95 rule where we see success. It comes from having a vision and an understanding of that at a higher level in the organization, and the leadership to get the different parties really working together and collaboratively again, so that they're driving towards the mission. And again, looking at all the different various, what you and I were just discussing in terms of life cycle cost versus first cost, and and the impact of this, and all the different impacts of it. And usually, when that's done, or those organizations are extremely successful, and these have incredible return when done right. And so it's actually just a better business approach as well, which I think is first and foremost the reality. A lot of times, what drives decisions is this needs to fit. It can't cost 20x, and in this case, it usually doesn't. It usually costs a percentage more upfront, of some of these designs. But then again, if you look at all these other co-benefits and life cycle costs, it usually wins out, in spades. So I think that would be my number one answer, is really just, kind of about leadership and a shared vision inside of an organization. I think when you talk about economics, I don't think from at least what we do, it's really a cost issue. If you look at utility rates around the country, they're skyrocketing and going up, same percentages, 20, 30%, really, really high. There's a lot of drivers in the marketplace that are incentivizing. So there's utility incentives, and there's drivers that are out there to motivate owners. And now there's even a large growing disincentive or penalties that are basically trying to drive owners and leadership to act on these issues. And so they're looking at penalizing high energy consuming buildings, inefficient buildings, high carbon intensive buildings. So there's a lot of drivers like that in New York and Boston and California and Denver and Seattle and Washington now. So those exist out there. So I think it's leadership, and I think it's just getting its education and getting the various people at the table that is the biggest solution to solving this problem. The economics are there; they shouldn't be the issue. And what we see and what we struggle with usually is just it's getting to all the various and getting them to move forward.
As I'm listening to you talk about that, I'm also thinking of different regulations that you are dealing with, depending on the state that the company is that you're working with, along with, just individual goals that the different stakeholders might have when it comes to their building designs, and really maximizing their costs, or I should say minimizing their costs, but maximizing the value and where they're going to see the most return on their investment. And I know that it's really the industry has changed as a whole. As you mentioned earlier, it's not just a facilities problem. It's you working with the different constituents, the different stakeholders, to really come up with a holistic plan that's going to help increase the efficiency of the building, whether it's we're talking about air quality or energy efficiency, everything else within the realm of a built environment. So I think that was a really good point that you had there. One thing we mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I would like to talk a little bit more about Thrive Buildings with you. And if you could kind of go into what Thrive Buildings is all about for those who may be not familiar with it.
Well, we Air Acuity originally was a technology and a platform, and was, we were really trying to bring a technology to market. And the built environment has a lot of long-standing large companies. So I started with Warren Johnson Controls. You have Siemens, you have Honeywell, you have Schneider, you have I can keep going on and on, Carrier and Trane, and all sorts of these very large, long-standing companies been around for 100 years. You almost think of them as like oligopolies or whatever, and they kind of have a strong strong hold on the industry and the way things happen in the industry. So we're trying to bring a new technology to market, and that's not, it has been easy in this market, as I alluded to earlier. I think when you look at Air Acuity as a technology and a technology, kind of a manufacturer, like sometimes gets used in this industry, of a technology in our platform, we created Thrive and evolved Thrive solely to implement the technology and airside energy efficiency in existing buildings. So what we saw customers the struggle with the most is that we or somebody else, a third party, could provide that technology to a customer, but that the end result wasn't fully realized and fully actualized because of a bunch of different reasons. And so we saw that from a new construction perspective, a lot of representatives could get our product spec'd, could get it put into a building. They could put the system into a new construction building, and that would be all really fine and well. But when it came to looking at an existing facility that was 30 years old and has a bunch of deferred maintenance and has, older place, how do you do an airside energy efficiency project in that building? So we, not by matter of like, let's dream this up in a lab and create this company, it's as many entrepreneurial and continuous commissioning of the systems for perpetuity, for the building. So again, embedding technology so that you, many times in the industry, what you'll see is you can get everything really then through portfolio, not just doing projects. And then again, I think the last part I would add to that is, it's a lot of experience goes into that, being able to work with a customer across all those different groups that we talked about. And this is not a short process.
No, typically, I imagine it's not.
Yeah, it could be a year-long endeavor that you're working. Exciting process for us as a company. So we're now kind of have a technology arm. We have this delivery arm, if you want to call it that. And then what we're actually building right now is a services arm, ongoing services over time, and help them with other things like compliance reporting, infectious control. If it's a groom, or if it's an animal research facility, or if it's an OR, and they're dealing with their compliance, regulations about helping maintain these facilities. Again, it's just this whole conversation just continually goes back to like, what's the core mission, right? What is that facility there to support? What are they trying to achieve, and how can you do that in the most sustainable and efficient way? And you can't do that just by some now need to, unfortunately, you really need to help some people sometimes thrive. And I think we've got a really exciting future ahead with Thrive and the ongoing services that we provide our customers. So thanks for asking. I haven't really described a lot of that. I haven't described that to many people. So
now you have, and you can go to the podcast. You want to learn more about Thrive? Listen to the conversation we had with Ian Leader, right?
Yeah.
All great points that you had there. And speaking of the future, what do you see in the future for smart buildings? I mean, obviously, we know technologies, other people not within the industry might not know about.
Probably. There's probably two questions there. So buildings are going to be We're talking about a lot of different building types, so it's a little bit hard for me to answer. But I will say that, like, commercial office building, as an example, they tend to be a little bit more variable occupied than they were previously. It's not 9 to 5, and it's not everybody in the office all the time and leaving at lunch. So, there's more flexible work schedules. These buildings, you now have these similar sized building, which might be occupied at, 50, 60% less than it was previously. And so they need to be smarter and adapt more and to be, or they'll be way more wasteful, right? So in order for them to be efficient and sustainable, they're going to need to adapt. And that's going to bring in intelligence and exactly what you said, smart buildings, right? Understanding who's there, where are they going in the building, what are they trying to do? When we look at research facilities, they tend to be less variable occupied. You need to be in your lab to do your research. So we don't see that same issue there, but we also know that labs historically have been 5 to 7, even as much as 10 to 15 times as efficient as energy consuming as like a commercial office space. So they're way more impactful in terms of the carbon footprint and sustainability side. They're way more impactful to address, and those buildings will be getting kind of way smarter with our technology and others to really, again, many of them historically have been prescriptively controlled, meaning I'm going to have some kind of prescribed air change rate, and I'm going to assume that that's a good, right? So if I'm operating a clean room, I'm going to have a design standard of 25 air changes, 40 air change rates, and I'm going to run it 24/7 all the time at that number. And they'll periodically measure, what's happening. And our approach is way simpler than that. It just says, no, measure it 24/7. And, if it's clean, take those air change rates way down. And if you start to see a spike way in advance, your compliance regulations require, start to ramp those systems up so that you don't even come close to your minimum, your maximum particle level threshold. So it's using technology, less prescriptive and much more of a measured and controlled dynamic approach to make those facilities optimized. And that's just one really good example of, I think, what you said, what people don't realize is happening. That's happening in ORs, it's happening in clean rooms, it's happening in research facilities. And I think to a large degree, controlled ventilation has been around from the built environment. I think from my experience, not only here, but previously, it's not always well implemented. If you use discrete sensors in those buildings, they kind of go out of calibration and don't, they can work if they're calibrated and maintained over the life of building. That's costly to do. And it's also not very often. So what ends up happening is somebody will put that in a brand new building. It'll go out of spec, and 3 years from now, that building is really inefficient. So again, it's putting in systems and technology that are going to sustain this over time. And then the last part of, I think, what's happening in the built environment, again, is this, what we're doing with this independent data layer is really kind of allowing owners to grab data from a lot of different sources in a building. Cost has come way down to do that. It's something that was around a long time ago with SCADA systems and really, really expensive facilities. Now the cost to do that in all buildings is becoming much more attainable. And then we see is really analytics and AI and other applications applied to that data layer. So again, simple. So leave you with this simple thought is, again, you cannot measure, improve, or optimize what you don't measure. So measure it first before you're going to optimize it and make an impact with what you're doing. So I think the IDL independent data layer is really something I think that you're going to just see become more ubiquitous across the built environment. There's some things that come top of mind, certainly, and we're involved in many of them on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. And as you mentioned before, it depends on the facility. It depends on, obviously a K through 12 school is going to have different requirements as opposed to a hospital, surgical rooms, ORs, all of that. So definitely a lot of things to take into account. And we've talked a lot, obviously, about smart buildings, resilient building designs, technology, but I want to focus the last part of our conversation on you and what personally, any exciting things coming up. Hopefully you'll make it to some Maryland games in the next a couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. For me, this is, I just said this to kind of actually our leadership ownership. I've never been, had more fun in my job and in the built environment. You can probably, see a little bit of that in all the things we touched on. The customers we get to work with. We just work in Mecca. We have an unbelievable, we're launching into new markets. We're trying to help the federal government kind of on a bunch of different fronts. Actually, this week I'm going down, can't really actually say, but I'm going to a very large government secure facility down south and working with them on optimizing their space. So it's incredibly exciting. And I think, largely, I think I see my future as really being to really fulfill this vision, which I had when I came here, and definitely taken a little bit longer than we thought it would. But it also it's been really fun, really exciting. And I see a lot more of that going forward. And then other than that, I've just, my last child is going to be out of college in 2 years. So just doing a little more traveling and hopefully personally rewarding stuff after working really hard to get 3 kids through college. But so having a little bit more fun time to travel and see some things. But I do get a lot of that with my job, which is fun and exciting. And I really very, very bullish on what we're doing and where we're going in the market. Forward to continue to talk about it. And this is a great opportunity to do so. So really appreciate you having me on and getting to tell our story.
Yes, no, I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk with me this morning. And I hope this is not the last conversation that we will have. We look forward to working with you and the company. Thank you to your team. They are wonderful. And it's been a pleasure to get to know some of the team members and as well as you. In the next 60 seconds, ask yourself, how can I contribute to a brighter, more sustainable future, not just personally, but professionally? Let's embark on this journey together and shape the landscape of sustainable leadership for tomorrow. Take the first step now and make a commitment to lead with sustainability in mind. That's all for this episode of Sustainability Unveiled. Join us next time as we continue exploring the forefront of sustainable business practices. Until then, stay informed, stay sustainable.